As you know, I like to vary my bowling, and today I want to tell you a story. Not a very happy story, but I think nonetheless an interesting story. And I want to take you back some 3,500 years to the beginning of the period of the Judges, that darkest period in the history of our people, when the nation of Israel sunk into the mire, the morass of immorality, of murder, violence, and above all, idolatry. In fact, at one point, the author of the book of Judges throws up his hands in despair and says the Israelites are worshipping every conceivable god except their own. However, there were pockets of those who still believed in the ancestral God of Israel. Individuals. And my story is about one of them. As his name suggests, he was a devotee of the one true God, Michayahu, who is like the Lord, shortened usually to Micha. Now Micha was a bit of a lad. He helped himself to his mother's life savings, 1,100 pieces of silver, a huge sum in today, but even far greater in those days. He has qualms of conscience, and he returns the money to Mummy, who's so moved, so pleased, that she is determined to make an act of devotion to the God of Israel. And so she takes 200 pieces of silver, gives it to her son, and says, take it to the silversmith and have it made into a molten image, statue, and a graven image, which we will dedicate to the God of Israel. Now, only recently we read that you're not allowed to make graven images and molten images, yet this dear lady wants to honour God by making them. Micha does as he is told, and he returns home with a golden image, with a molten image, graven image, and he installs them in his own private chapel. He has a house of God. And he takes one of his sons and he consecrates him to be a Kohen, a priest. He robes him and fits him out, and he's now my Kohen. Of course, this is nonsense. Our friend Micha was an Ephraimite. Only descendants of the tribe of Levi could function as priests. But nonetheless, he does it in the greater glory of God. However, fortune will smile on him. He has a chance visitor, a young man who reveals, I am a Levi. Oh, Micha jumps in. Then stay with me. I'll give you a stipend. You can be my priest, my father confessor. I'll provide your clothing, your food. I'll house you. Now young Levite is not slow to take up an opportunity, and he consents. He will remain as the priest of Micha, serving before his molten image and his graven image. Micha now sits back very pleased with himself and observes, look how well God is treating me. He's provided me with a genuine Bedouin Levi who can act as a priest to my idolatrous images. But the story is now going to take an unhappy turn. The tribe of Dan were in search of a place to settle. It was the beginning of the period of the Judges. They had not yet conquered their territory. And they pass by Micha's home, and they hear the voice of the Levi, and they recognise it. They said to him, what's a nice guy like you doing in a place like this? He told them, I'm the personal chaplain to Micha. And they said to him, wouldn't you rather come with us and be the priest of a tribe in Israel and not just some private chaplain? Again, our Levi is not slow on the uptake. And he literally takes up Micha's idols, his graven image, his molten image, his priestly robes, everything. And he follows the tribe of Dan. Micha discovers the robbery, goes chasing after them with his neighbours, and the Danites, 600 fully armed men in a mean mood, turn on him. And they give him a warning. Go home whilst you're still able to do so. Micha gets the message and he returns home without his molten image, without his graven image, without his Levi and his robes. Micha has lost everything. But of course it's an amazing story insofar as Micha seems to be blissfully unaware that what he's doing is an abomination. God has forbade these molten and graven images, and he's doing it in the greater glory of God. And it would continue for generations. If you would have gone into Solomon's temple 100 years before its destruction, you would have found there images to the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, even the sky chariot of God. All of them an abomination. Installed, if you please, by kings of the house of David. Now, how could they do this? What was the matter with them? They knew the law. The truth of the matter is, they convinced themselves, if I do this in the name of God, I'm making it holy. They failed to realise that you cannot make the unholy holy. You simply cannot make an abomination sacred. But there was one further element of Micha's story that I've saved. Our Levite was anonymous, didn't have his name. And yet, the author of Judges tells us, ultimately, his name was Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the grandson of Moses. Let that sink in. The man who stood before God on Mount Sinai to be told, no graven images, no molten images, and yet his grandson is functioning as a priest before them. And indeed, the family of Moses will continue with this role for the next 500 years, down to the destruction of the northern kingdom. They failed to understand. Not Moses, he knew only too well, but his descendants and the people of Israel failed to understand you cannot consecrate an abomination. And this, of course, continues to this day. I have in mind gay marriage, the use of a religious ceremony to consecrate the love between two people of the same sex. Christians are not so keen about it. The Church of England is half and half. And as for the Catholic Church, they won't even talk about it. But the Jewish community in England, they jumped on the bandwagon. Liberal, Reform, now even Masorti are prepared to conduct marriages between two people of the same sex. And if you're saying to them, but you know this is an abomination, you know it's forbidden by God's Torah, they'll tell you any love between two people is sacred, and we feel a moral responsibility to consecrate their love with a religious ceremony. It's an abomination, and you cannot make it holy. But there's an even worse example of this, much more widespread. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have been slaughtered throughout the world, but particularly in the Middle East, in the name of God. When the jihadist plunges his dagger into the breast of his victim, he will cry out, Allahu Akbar. I do this for the glory of God. He can't even see that this is a profanity. It's an abomination. You cannot sanctify it. So, my friends, we're living in a darkened world, and it's getting darker. But we believe that 3,500 years ago, God shone his light into his world. He gave the Torah to the Jewish people, and the Torah is light. Ki ner mitzvah, the Torah or. The mitzvah is a lamp, and Torah is light. Although it was intended initially for the Jewish people, it was also intended to benefit the whole of mankind. But that's our messianic ideal. The day would come when the whole of humanity will come to the Jewish people and say, teach us the Torah of God. But until then, we're living in a darkened world, Lord. So please, shine your light into your world. Let it illuminate the darkest recesses of the hearts and minds of men, that they should be moved to introduce a component of genuine holiness into their lives, but let it be on your terms, not theirs.